Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mind Your Soul from a neuroscientific perspective. And today's guest is Shirvin, who is a psychotherapist in Canada. Can you introduce yourself, Shirvin? And thanks for being here today.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Shirvin. I'm based in Vancouver, Canada, and I love to be able to incorporate my science background with therapy in the sense of, explaining that there's just so much going on outside of our thoughts. What's happening in our bodies, what's happening in our surroundings, how do we grow up? So many different factors that make up who we are. And I'm here today to talk with Farah about all of that. So excited to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. And we kind of connected over Instagram. We kind of liked each other's posts and we just followed each other on Instagram. And to have you on the podcast because I really learned so much from your content. And I think our listeners will really benefit from your knowledge because you do have that mixture of the psychotherapy with science. And I think that's really powerful. So that's why I invited you over because I think your knowledge is very valuable to our listeners.
Thank
Um,
you.
yes. So the first question is we know that anxiety is a complex interplay of brain functions and psychological factors. So, how do you approach anxiety from a psychotherapist perspective? And how does this influence your therapeutic techniques? Yeah.
I think it's important to first explain what anxiety means because it's
Oh,
such
yeah.
a big umbrella term. And whenever someone brings up anxiety with me, I help them take a step back and think about okay, so, when we look at the definition of anxiety, it refers to being nervous or dreading or fearful of the unknown, of an
Hmm.
outcome that's going to happen, of happening in the future, and something you might not even have control over. And
Hmm.
it makes a lot of sense to be nervous about something you're not sure what's going to happen, what the outcome is, and being able to either manage those expectations, look into what the symptoms are like. And for example, it might be your heart rate's going up, your palms are sweaty, you're having these racing thoughts that's causing you to feel agitated and restless. And we think about how can we help our body regulate or calm down. So that's a way of looking into the science behind what's going on in our bodies as well as what's going on in our minds, and working together to help bring us back to a state that's more calm and grounded.
I love that. But it's so true. Like, anxiety has many faces, right? Like, anxiety can be like something small triggering you, but it can escalate to something really big if you don't know how to handle it.
Mhm.
So I feel like anxiety is like a really broad term, but it could be, it's like so specific also, right? What my anxiety is different from yours. And like all of it is just as important, but it's like small things can trigger anxiety as well, right? So it's really like, how do you cope with it? How do you handle when you feel this anxiety? How do you get along with it? How do you work with it so it doesn't affect you like in the long term as well? And I think many of your clients probably have anxiety, and you kind of treat them. So do you do like exercises or um to like cope with their anxiety, because it's very individual, right?
Yeah. And I like what you said in the beginning about it can be so specific. And the reason why I want
Mm-hmm.
to go back onto that point is, with anxiety, sometimes we just use that word to explain everything that we're feeling. But when we're able to more
Mm-hmm.
accurately identify what we're feeling. So let's say, you're anxious about a presentation you have to do tomorrow. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're also, you're nervous about it, or you're afraid of what's going to happen. And when we're able to dive deeper into what the anxiety looks like, that's one way, in therapy that we work on it. It's okay, so what are going to be the outcomes that are possible? How can we squash some of that fear that you have? How can we prepare so that you feel a little less nervous? What are some tools that you can have in your back pocket for the day of to help with, again, regulating and calming down your nervous system, calming down your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So when we break it
Mm-hmm.
down into these tangible steps, into identifiable emotions, I think it just makes us so much more, manageable to tackle the anxiety rather than it just being something that looms over your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally get that. And also, you just said about your thoughts. That's what brings me to neuroplasticity, which is like a significant aspect of the brain's ability to change and adapt. Like what we think is what we are and believe. So that's like it plays like a vital role in anxiety, I would say. So, do you work with neuroplasticity? Like, how can psychotherapy leverage neuroplasticity to help individuals rewire their brain's response to anxiety triggers?
Hmm. I don't necessarily talk about neuroplasticity with my clients who are bringing up
Oh,
anxiety
okay.
in general, but it does come up a lot with the clients I work with in chronic pain. And the reason
Oh,
is,
okay.
there's just so much change that's happening in your body. And that happens to people who are experiencing different things. It doesn't have to just be chronic or acute pain. And I think neuroplasticity is a
Mm-hmm.
helpful way for us to understand, like you said, the changes that are happening in our brain that are, causing us to do something a bit differently or feel differently about a certain way. And I think just there's just some bit of, I hope, comfort knowing that there are changes happening in our body that we can't see. It's not visible to the eye, but it's an explanation to why we feel or act in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I agree on that note. Also curious to know because you said you work with chronic pain patients. So chronic pain patients, they have the pain all the time, right? Because it's chronic.
Yes.
So for them to live with that pain is like, I think it has a lot to do with your mindset. Like, how do they get along in their day? Like, they have some tools to cope with the pain. Like, how can they get through their day with feeling pain? It's like physical pain, right? Is physical is also mentally pain. Like,
I
your
think
patients
it's
is like physical is also mental or
Mhm. I think it's all the above. When you're experiencing physical pain, it's going to impact your quality of life. It's going to impact your mood, your focus, and, consequently, it's going to impact your mental health and it's going to make you feel that mental
Mhm.
pain that you mentioned. And, I think it's just being able to understand what's going on and to explain that to ourselves so that we're able to see what's happening and feel what's happening all in one connection. And something you mentioned about the way they feel about their pain, is it going to change it? And actually, yes, there's research that shows that the way you feel about your pain, the way you perceive something, can really impact the way that you feel it you know there was this one research that talked about a man who thought a nail had pierced the bottom of his boot, and he was screaming in pain. And when he got to the hospital and took off his boot, it actually, the nail never pierced his foot, it never touched his foot, yet he was feeling the pain as though it did. And a lot of that had to do with the
oh
way
wow.
he perceived it and how his brain acted on it. So, I'm not necessarily saying you should change the way you think so that you're not feeling so anxious all the time, so that you don't feel this pain all the
Hmm.
time, because that's easier said than done. But what I will
Yes.
say is perspective is really important. And I think it can really influence the way we feel things. It can influence the way we want to grow from a situation, and is really the difference between someone who has a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Could you elaborate on the fixed and the growth mindset just for our listeners? Because
Yeah,
there's like a huge difference between these two mindset.
there definitely is. And for anyone who is interested, there's a book by Carol Dweck, and she talks about the fixed and growth mindset if you wanted to check that out. But essentially, someone with a fixed mindset is someone who I'm trying to use the word fixed, and I'm like, that's not a good way to define a word by using the same word. But someone with a fixed
No, I get
mindset
that.
is someone who, I guess for lack of better words, is stuck. You know, it's
Yes,
one
I think
way
that's
or
the
the
accurate word,
highway.
actually. Yeah,
You know, you
yeah.
see this one way of doing something, and that's the only way. You're not open to different ideas, not open to brainstorming, flexibility, other
Mhm.
perspectives. Whereas someone with a growth mindset is able to, appreciate and embrace changes, differences, mistakes that they've made, and use those as ways for them to grow and for them to change.
That was beautifully put because that's how it is actually. And I talk about this a lot too because when you're in that stuck mindset or the fixed mindset, you can't evolve as a person. You're just in the same situation and you're kind of a prisoner of your own mind, right? You're kind of trapped in your own mindset because you don't see things as you want to see them and you don't want to evolve and learn and grow. So you're kind of stuck and you kind of chosen to be stuck there yourself. But sometimes we do need help to get out of there because it's our comfort zone, right? We used to
Hmm.
being there and it feels safe even though it's painful, it's safe to us. So yeah, it's very important to highlight that you can always change the narrative. If you get the right help, you can get over and get on the other side of it. um,
Mhm.
yeah. So, Sherwin, I'm also curious to know about the role of neurotransmitters in anxiety. So, how do your therapeutic methods consider the influence of neurotransmitter imbalances or dysregulations in anxiety disorders?
And maybe if we could talk about what neurotransmitters are first, maybe I could bring that back to you. How would you explain neurotransmitters and anxiety? Because that's actually not something I do a lot to explain in
No.
sessions.
Okay, so neurotransmitters are the neurons in our brain. Our brain is like divided in so many parts, and anxiety is the big part of amygdala, which is our emotional center. It's like it just feeds off of fear, I would say. And when we feel anxiety, this is like it's heightened, and it goes around in the brain, then in the other parts of the brain, like in the prefrontal cortex, in the cerebellum, like all the other parts that we use to think rationally are kind of affected by this. So the neurotransmitters go around in our brain, and it's just heightened, because we don't know how to cope with this, and we sweat and our blood pressure is raised and we feel this like body wise, we also know that the brain and the body is correlated. So what happens is that the neurotransmitters go into our bodies and have this reaction of like panic. You hyperventilate, you sweat. Like I can recall all of this. So I know how it feels when I feel anxiety, and now I'm on the other side. I know how to cope with it. But like when I did not know this, it was really hard for me, and I actually went through the whole thing, like hyperventilating. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't breathe. I was sweating. Like it was just my eyes were like blurring. So yeah, it started in the brain. It's amygdala, which is a big part of it. Yeah.
Hmm. And I'm so glad I asked you to clarify that because I've seen your posts and you do such a great job at bringing in the different parts of the brain and explaining that in terms of mental health and anxiety. And it's very much like you said,
Thank you.
and what we mentioned earlier, those physical symptoms that we experience, the heightened heart rates, the sweaty hands and palms,
Mhm.
your body just feels like you're maybe something's building up in your stomach, in your gut, and your shoulders are tense, your jaw's
Mm.
tense. And the word that comes to mind whenever clients talk about their anxiety and how they're experiencing it in their bodies is notice. Notice what you're feeling. Notice what's going on in your body. When was the last time you relaxed your face and your jaw? Can you roll back your shoulders and drop them for a bit? Can
Mhm.
you take some deep breaths? Do you need some water? Are you dehydrated? Maybe it's getting
Mhm.
really warm. Maybe you need to get some fresh air, go outside for a little bit and distract yourself. And I know sometimes these kind of tips and strategies can sound unhelpful or sound very basic. But actually, when we reset our bodies, we're clearing the pathway for our minds to be able to think more rationally, to think without
Yes.
being in such a heightened state. Your body's going
Yes.
into this fight or flight and even freeze mode. You might be
Yes.
freezing when it comes to the nerves. You might be in the flight mode because you just don't want to do whatever needs to be done. So there are so many different responses that our body's going through, and being able to recognize that and see how the anxiety is playing a role in our brains and our bodies, it can help us, again, I'm going to say it, reset and ground our bodies and regulate our nervous systems.
Yeah, but that's very true. And that's actually brings me to like what has helped me a lot is doing mindfulness, practicing meditation. I've been doing it for years. And now I can even do it without the sound in my ears. I do both actually. I can do both, like with the sound meditation, with the voice meditation, I think is called. And I can also just close my eyes, be in nature, and meditate and feel my inner voice. But this has taken practice to get there. Like like diminishing all the noises around me and just feeling in tune with myself. This has taken a lot of practice in order to be where I am today. And they always say practice makes perfect, but like I still practice it because when I'm out of in tune with myself, like I need to just bring myself back, and it takes a bit longer. So I would say mindfulness is very important. Anxiety, like your patients could benefit from mindfulness and meditation and doing breathing exercises, because that has helped me personally a lot.
And I think it's about finding what works for you, because meditation might
Mm,
not be for everyone. Journaling might not be for
yeah, that's true.
everyone. And on the same note, just because it's not something that you find beneficial in your practice regularly, it doesn't mean that when there are certain moments that happen, it could help you, you know? Maybe there's a point where writing it out, really getting all your thoughts out, can be very healing for you. Or sitting and
Mhm.
just not thinking about anything, listening to how you can breathe from a guided meditation is the only thing that you can focus on at that time. So, going back to mindfulness, which really means listening to what you need in the present and without judgment, is, I think, one of the most important things you can do for yourself. Maybe today is the day that you need a nap. Maybe today is the day that going out for a walk and calling someone to talk about what's going on is going to be the most helpful thing for you. Maybe it's distracting yourself. So, listening to what you need and what's going on is so important.
It really is. Okay, we've been cutting off a lot. Yeah, I would say mindfulness is very important, but sometimes people do not know, like when they're feeling this anxious or having these anxiety triggers, they don't know like what should I do now. So that's why it's resourceful to like seek help for this, because they don't always know like how can I cope with this? How do I handle this? Sometimes it's taboo in different cultures, and people don't want to like share their side of themselves, because they feel like they're the only ones experiencing it. So I don't know if you're familiar with communities like this, but I feel like where I live in Denmark, we don't have many communities like that talk about this, but you can individually seek a therapist help or coaching, but we don't have like group communities or something like that here where you can talk about this openly. I still feel like even though I live in a Western society, it's like a taboo to feel all of these triggers. It's like, okay, you just seek your help. Like people don't voice this enough. What are your thoughts about this?
There's definitely a lot of stigma and taboo when it comes
Hmm.
to mental health. And I think that, you know, being seen as someone who's weak or incapable comes up a lot for anyone who's trying to get support or get help. But with even anxiety is something everyone experiences. It's a
Exactly.
normal
It's
part
very
of our
normal.
lives.
Hmm.
It really is. And being able to talk about it, being able to recognize when support is helpful for you and knowing how to reach out is someone who really is in that growth mindset compared to the fixed mindset of, I'm going to white knuckle it. I'm just going to take it on and do it myself. It's not a
Hmm.
big deal. I shouldn't need to go pay money for this. And I'm not saying you have to go see a therapist or a coach or go pay for support, but what I'm saying is to listen to yourself, to listen to what's going on and give yourself what you need. Whether it's, connecting with a professional who can provide you with strategies or listen to you in a way that you've never been listened to before, or whether it's, saying no to some things that people have asked of you because you just need a break. Just need boundaries. It all comes down to listening to what you need and accepting that you are human. Things happen, and that's okay.
That was beautiful, Shervin.
Thank you.
Yes, because we are all humans, and I think it's, yeah, as you said, we all do have different types of anxiety. It's kind of normal. It should not be a stigma, or it should not be something that is unnormal. I
Hmm.
talk about this a lot with my children actually, because we all have different triggers, and even as children, like they start very early, showing some symptoms, and it's really about how you handle them and how you address them as an adult as well. So I feel like in school also I see like many kids struggling with different things, like growing up, right? It's not easy. We've been there.
Yeah.
It's not. It's really not. But it's not like we don't have kind of a subject in school talking about anxiety triggers,
We
or
need it.
that's what I'm saying. We really need it. Like we don't have a mental health subject like covering all of this. I feel like I had to like discover it in my youth, like in my 20s. I had to like figure out I'm feeling this. I'm feeling X and I want to feel like Y. And what do I do to get there? Like we don't have like a helping hand, or I think today is different. There's more awareness about it, but like growing up, there was not much about this. And so when my kids talk about they feel this and that in school, I'm like, okay, so we can do this and this about this. But growing up, I felt like I was really alone with my anxiety. And my
Mhm.
parents, like with Asian background, like not born in the Western society. So it was like they could not help me with my Western problems always. So I really felt alone growing up, and it just the anxiety just kept growing bigger and bigger, and it was so big at a time. I was like, I need to seek help, so I invested money going to therapy, coaching, and it's really been the best money invested because I invested in myself, right? I learned so much, and so yeah, and now I can teach my children as well. Of course there will be different problems coming all the time, but I think like I have the tools now to cope with it. Like I'm so aware of it. So yeah, we should definitely have a subject in school about this.
I agree. Or just, I don't know, webinars or a weekly mandatory workshop for life
Yes.
skills. You know, learning about mental health, learning about what taxes are, whatever that might be. Honestly, maybe not everything in high school, but I think that if there were one or two mandatory webinars or workshops or something like that in university per semester on life skills, I would have loved to attend that and just be able to learn things that are so applicable to your daily life.
Yeah, because it really is, right? Because this is something that is part of us 24/7. Like, how do we wake up? How do we go through our day? How do we create this daily dose of happiness? When anxiety hits us in the face, how do we cope with it?
Mhm.
And it could be a kid saying a phrase to my kid or something that triggers something really big, and then they can't cope with their whole day, and their whole day's ruined. And it's like, it's kids, so something small to them is really big, right?
Yeah.
When I'm like, oh my God, you don't know, this world is crucial. Like, I'm like, okay, it's a small problem, but to you, it's really, really big because you're only like 10 or whatever. So, like, it's everything is from their perspective, right? And so I feel like we haven't learned this. And as a mother, I haven't been taught this. Like, how should I cope with different age of anxiety when I also have my own anxiety? I need to like cope with everybody's anxiety, right?
And I think there are
Yeah.
two things here, 2 points that you've made. And something small to you could be big to someone, I think, regardless of age. And that's so important
That's
to
true.
keep in mind, because when we say, it's not a big deal, or don't even worry about it. Why are you worrying about it? It's nothing. It can really dismiss someone and make someone
Mm,
feel very
I agree.
small with their anxiety. So, regardless of what age or what you're dealing with, it's normal to have anxiety. It's okay to be nervous about something or worry about what's going to happen.
Hmm.
And being able to, you know, voice that, to recognize that, to look for support, to do things that soothe you, to regulate you, that's where it all comes down to. Having the tools in your back pocket, in your toolkit, to know how to work through the anxiety, regardless of your age, regardless of who you're with. That's really important.
Yeah, I think it's very important to address and validate the emotions that like
Mhm.
when you're feeling when you have anxiety. And as you're saying, not dismissing it. I feel like in society it's like, oh, don't worry, it'll pass. With time, it will be better. Like, it's okay to feel certain things, and to you it's a big thing and you need to address it. So we need to actually find out how to cope with it instead of dismissing it, right? Because I feel like this is what people say to you when you reach out. It's like, oh, don't worry, it's such a small thing, and in two
Mhm.
days it will be gone. Like, you worry too much, you're an overthinker, stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm allowed and to have my emotions, and I'm allowed to cry it out or whatever, because this is a big thing to me. It might not be a big thing to you. And like, to me, it's really important that I cope with I work with it instead of like working against it. Yeah.
Exactly. And each person goes through it differently. It's probably true that it's not going to be a big deal in 2 days, but I'm not thinking about how it's going to be like in 2 days. I'm thinking about right now how I'm panicking about whatever I'm panicking about. So it's very unhelpful when you tell me not to worry about it like that. What's more helpful is
Yeah,
to
because
tell
it's not helping you
someone,
right now.
yeah. So it's much more effective and helpful to someone to say, I can't imagine how nervous you are right now. Or, that sounds like it just really sucks. Let me know if there's something I can do for you, and
Exactly.
to be there right now. Mhm.
I think that was exactly what you need to hear when you're feeling these things. Instead of dismissing it, but actually acknowledging your emotions and trying to help you out. Like, is there something I can do for you? Because you feel overwhelmed, right? When you have anxiety, and sometimes just reaching out for a helping hand. Like, can I pick this up for you, or do you want a cup of tea, or something? A small gesture can actually be really big for someone who is going through anxiety. So I think that was a good note. Any final thoughts before we end the podcast on anxiety triggers? I think we covered a lots of science, and we covered a lots of triggering and what you can do with it.
Mhm.
Any final thoughts, Sharvin, as you work with this professionally?
I think it's really brave that people are willing to work on themselves, because it's not easy to see the areas that we might need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
It could make us feel like we're incapable or we're unworthy, but I think it actually makes you a very strong person. And if I were to summarize everything we said today, there are 2 points. The first is to notice what's going on in your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts and in your body. And then the second is to just listen to what you need, because what you need matters and you deserve to have the support that you need.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sherwin. It was a beautiful episode, and I'm looking forward to releasing it. And now my son is talking in the background.
Thank you so
So
much. Life
thank you so much.
happens.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for today. So I will release this to Spotify and Apple. and you can see our you can see our both our names in the background. So yeah, thank you so
Sounds
much, Shervin.
good.
It's a pleasure having you here today.
Thanks for having
Bye.
me. Bye.
We're welcome. Bye.